Hello, fellow hams, CBers, shortwave listeners, and anyone else that may have found our stream. Welcome to you, whether you are in the field, in the shack, or somewhere in between. During this stream, my colleagues and I will discuss a range of topics, including but not necessarily limited to the ham radio exploits of our guest, Mr. Phil McBride, Victor Alpha 3, Quebec Romeo, and those are many and varied. If you're attending the live stream, we encourage you to drop a question into the chat. If you're watching this as a video post event and have a question for us, please leave a comment and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. This stream is being broadcast both on my YouTube channel, Outdoors on the Air, and Chris's YouTube channel, Kilo 2, Charlie Juliet Bravo. So without any further ado, let's introduce tonight's team. We'll start with my co-hosts. First up is Chris, Kilo 2, Charlie Juliet Bravo. What's new in your world, Chris?
Well, no, what's new? It depends how you look at it, I guess. As far as the ham radio world, it hasn't been. I haven't been all that active. I'm trying to think. I got on a couple of times, just kind of tuning around on HF, and both in my truck and at home. Last night, I was listening. Actually, something that we almost regret listening to sometimes. I was listening to the Hurricane Watch Net from Florida, and a friend of mine, N2JW, actually, who I've known since high school. He's actually the guy who got me into ham radio. He lives in Orlando, so I was in touch with him quite a bit yet last night to see how he was holding up. And thankfully, the storm, went south of him and went out east. So he just had a lot of wind and rain, but nothing that caused any issues. So, but that's really the last time I was on doing anything. In fact, while I was tuning around, I heard on 20 meters, believe it or not, at night, I heard Madagascar and I heard Reunion Island, but there was just above the noise level. I said, So I went over to 40 meters and I worked the guy in Luxembourg. So, okay.
Fantastic. Nice job. Okay, thanks, Chris. Next up is Tim Ortiz, November 9, Sierra Alpha Bravo. Tim has a thriving eBay store from which he sells high-quality wire antennas. Good evening, Tim. What's going on in your world?
Nothing new. I'm still. I can't get over the ICOM hat Chris is wearing. If he could wear that,
I won this. I won it at a ham.
Yeah. Funny you should say something about the Hurricane Watch. Actually, my son is stationed in Kings Bay, Georgia, and they've been really worried about the hurricane coming up the coast and hitting that area there too. So they've been very, very busy the past couple of weeks. But I guess it's been degraded now to a tropical storm or something like that. And I guess it's
well, they just came back up to a Cat 1 again before it hits. Now it's out over the ocean. So
okay, well, great, good. Yeah, I hope nobody had too much trouble from that. But other than that, just staying busy. I got my antenna up at the lake house. I actually did a modified little random wire up into a tree about 30 feet, and have been working FT8 over the past weekend or so. That's a lot of fun. I got the 817 out there, so I'm only 5 watts, but I've been getting out pretty good.
Nice. Good job. All right. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Now introducing our special guest, our ham hero number 3, Phil McBride, Victor Alpha 3, Quebec Romeo. Phil was licensed back in 1994 as Victor Alpha 3, Kilo Papa Juliet. He got the call sign Victor Alpha 3, Quebec Romeo in 2003. Phil was the licensee and sole Canadian member of the Charlie Yankee 9 Charlie St. Paul Island DXpeditions in 2016 and 2019. We'll ask him more about that experience in a moment. He was a guest operator at the Tango Mike 100 Vimy Victor India Mike Yankee special event station in Vimy, France in 2017. Phil was a member of CFARS, that's CFARS, formerly a training officer. He stepped down as a training officer upon becoming the RAC president with the CFARS call sign Charlie India Whiskey 601. He was the Radio Amateurs of Canada, Ontario South Regional Director from 2015 to 2021. Phil has been the Radio Amateurs of Canada South Regional president since at the beginning of this year. Radio Amateurs of Canada, for those outside of Canada, is the Canadian equivalent of the Amateur Radio Relay League, or Britain's RSGB. So Phil's a very important person in ham radio circles here in Canada. Phil's
big deal.
Sorry, what's that?
The president, that's a pretty big deal.
I'm glad I'm wearing a nice shirt tonight.
Phil's interest in the hobby mostly revolve around field and portable HF operations,
yes,
disaster communications operation and planning, satellite communications, digital communications, mainly with modes that are asynchronous, and outreach to the community to show people what amateur radio is, especially youth. So with that, welcome to our live stream, Phil. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Phil, tell us a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, how did you get involved in ham radio in the first place?
Well, I've been a geek since I can remember, going back in my life. I was about 9 years old when I got my father to buy me my first CB radio. The story is on my QRO HF page. I played with CBs up until I was about 13. During this process, there was a guy down the road from us who had 2 kids my age, and I used to play with him. And he had this giant tower and this weird antenna in the air. And I'd been in his house a few times, and I remember walking into what I now know as his shack, and this big stack of VA3QR equipment and him talking around the world. And he's like, "That's ham radio." Okay. So fast forward a few years, 13 years old, I decide I go to Radio Shack and I see the brand new HTX 202, which I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. And I told the store owner, who knew me by name, "Terry, I want to buy that." He's like, "You can't have that. You have to have a license." So I put it on layaway, and I took 4 cracks at the test, and the 4th time I passed. And I got my license on May 5th, 1994. And I joined my local club, and I got involved in, because I was a kid, can't have anything at home, don't have a car, so I've got a handheld. So I did a lot of field day was always a fun one for me. I did a lot of community service communications, things like parades, bike-a-thons, the car shows that we did around here. Fast forward into my 20s. I'm living on my own apartment. My high school calls and says, "We're going to throw out all of our old ham gear that we had. Do you want it?" I said, "Sure," because I'm broke. We're usually broke in our 20s.
That's right.
So I went and picked it all up, and amongst the wreckage was a Heathkit HW101, which I restored back to health after a lot of help from the internet and a few donations from people. So, someone donating, power supply here, a tuner here. Restored it. This is great. And then I realized I didn't have HF privileges, so I spent the next 3 weeks getting enough code to pass the test. And I got my 2-letter suffix call, and then from there got into HF. And then as I got older, I got more involved in the hobby. I've tried to do everything. Like VHF, UHF, HF communications. I like operating the field. Back then and even now, I do a lot of camping. Back then it was intense. Now it's in a trailer because I'm done sleeping on the ground. But I still like operating the field. Got into disaster communications planning has always been a thing. I've been, I was the EC and the DEC for my area. I have had a hand in doing volunteer communications plans for the municipality where I live. And then I got involved in RAC when the province of Ontario started to crack down on what's called distracted driving, and when they started to conflate two-way radio use with cellular phone use. And that's what got me involved in RAC, so I could help protect that. And then from there, after that was fixed, which that was fixed 2 years ago, I stayed involved in RAC because I realized that in Canada, this is the organization that has the seat at the table with the government, and we're the ones representing the interests with the people in government who listen. So, and I like spending money.
Phil, let me ask you this. So before we went live here, you were telling us the story, and I think American hams are really going to be amazed by this. You were talking about how Radio Amateurs of Canada have a great working relationship with the government here and the governing body for communications, and that we don't have any real restrictions aside from a height restriction in terms of being able to erect antennas. Could you just tell me a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, sure. So in 2014, then Industry Canada, now known as Industry Science and Economic Development Canada, or what we call ISED, published a document. For those of you who want to look it up, it's CPC 02-0-03. And it's a circular which defines parameters around the erection of what they call antenna support structures. Now, it's mainly geared toward commercial entities, cellular, broadcast, that kind of stuff. However, it does touch on private entities, and under Section 6, under exclusions, it says that any private entity, so meaning non-commercial, can erect an antenna support structure up to 15 meters in height, and that's to the top of the last radiator, like if you've got an X50 to the top of the tower, is measured from that to the ground, and you can do so without the need to consult a land use authority. And they were very careful with that language. They didn't say municipality. They didn't say, your condo board. They said land use authority. So that's anyone who has authority over the use of the land that you're on. So, which is a gift, because technically, if you're in a condo, if you're on a condo, or if you're in a rental, you can erect that. Now, I wouldn't recommend erecting a tower and somewhere where you're renting. You're going to cause yourself a problem. But if you want to throw up a vertical, that counts. It also states that any temporary antenna structure, which I believe is defined as anything that's up for less than 3 weeks, is allowed, and that was a gift to us. And so that also means if you want to have a tower that's taller, let's be honest, we all know people who have bigger towers than that. They're very clear. You now have to go through whatever process your municipality or the province might require of you. So that's in Canada. That's how it works here, and it has made life easier for hams. I've never had an issue where I've had anyone complain to me about a tower. I'm like this. I told you the story. I'm not going to share that publicly, but there have been people who may have grumbled about my tower going up, but no one's ever really complained to my face, and the town has never come to my door. So.
Fantastic. That and I just want to say this, and I have not been prompted to say this, but if you're a Canadian ham, or I guess if you're an American ham or anywhere in the world, and you don't belong to your national radio organization, you're missing a chance to help them support you and your efforts. One of the biggest threats to ham radio is, as it's always been, and that's been spectrum grabs from other services, and national radio organizations help fight against this. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage people to go out and, if you're not already, then join your national association.
I was actually this morning talking to the members of the Canadian contingent who are going to be going to World Radio Conference 2023. And there's absolutely a grab out there, especially in the microwave bands. There are significant commercial interests, cellular, radio navigation services, who are out there, and the International Amateur Radio Union, which is the international body that is made up of the national organizations that RAC and ARRL and RSGB are members of. It's through our efforts with them that we are able to fend off. That we are able to maintain what we're able to maintain. We're not going to win them all, but in 2019 at WRC 19, Canada was was the primary force behind 2,200 meters, 630 meters, and the new 15 kilohertz segment at 60 meters, which Canada was just granted with the ratification of the new copy of RBR4. For my American friends, that's our Part 97.
Fantastic. Hey, I don't know if you saw the note from Rod Murray. Rod's a good guy.
Yep.
He says you were his basic examiner in 2020. Now, you did not put that on your resume that you were also a basic. How much have you done in ham radio? That's very impressive.
I only became an accredited examiner for the Guelph Amateur Radio Club about 6 months before COVID hit. And then COVID hit. But then since then, myself and I worked very closely with the regulatory guys at RAC and with ISED to come up to clarify the rules around remote examinations, which were never allowed before COVID. Now it appears to be something that we think is going to stay. It's here to stay. the idea that you can do an exam remotely. RAC putting on courses at the beginning of the pandemic was kind of me kicking people really hard and getting it going. And it's something I think RAC is going to continue. I talked about this at the AGM 3 weeks ago, where is, you know, the clubs are coming back and doing their own courses now, which is great. But one of the hurdles of growth of amateur radio in Canada is the vastness of this country. And it's similar to the United States, but they're even more so. And RAC providing the courses and accredited examiners being able to do examinations remotely, give people in areas of the country who would normally not be able to access the service, the ability to do so.
Fantastic. Hey, listen, there's we got a whole bunch of people commenting. I'm going to apologize right now. I can't respond to each of you individually. Thank you for your comments. Sam Jones, what band is he on, or are you talking about the station? Sam, I don't have enough clarity on your question to be able to get an answer for you. So maybe you could write us something a little bit else into the chat. Now, I think I mentioned earlier that, you know, we could do an entire show on some of these things, but I just want to move along, and let's take a look at your own ham shack here, Phil. What can you tell us about your own ham shack?
Okay. It's taken me years to put it together, and every time I look at it once in a while, I go, "Wow, I spent way too much money on this." I bought one of the first Flex 5000As when they first came out, with all the options, including the UHF module. Still use it. Still my favorite radio. Got a Ameritron ALS 1300 amplifier I've got a Kenwood TS590 SG that I use mainly for digital comms, although I can use my Flex for digital comms too. Everything is driven by computer. I've got several antennas outside. I've got a 20 to 10 meter mini beam up top with a Comet tri-bander above it. Got a 135 foot long OCF dipole. I've got a random wire that I use for other stuff. I've got a Hustler 6 BTV vertical with all the DX engineering mods for 12, 17, and 60. I have a satellite array, so I've got a Yaesu Azel rotor with a couple of Wemo 2 meter and 70 centimeter circularly polarized beams that I use for AMSAT. And I use the Flex 5000 for my satellite work, and it is the easiest and the most pleasant satellite experience I've ever had, with the software that it's put out for that. And various other bits. You know, I've got, you see up at the top there, the 1954 Nortel stick phone, which still works if you plug it in.
I love that. I love that. Have you got two of them, and one's gold, or is it brass?
My Elmer passed away in 2019, and he willed me the contents of his house. So I got to go pick and choose from the artifacts. He worked for Bell and Nortel for 35 years. So there were Pulse style phones from the 50s from Motorola still in the crates I was finding in his house. So I made a couple of collectors really happy.
I bet you did. Hey, I want you to see this comment, Phil.
I saw that. So I could speak a little bit to that. Because it's funny because there are two sets of people in amateur radio. There are those who are like, it's all about public service, and there are those who are like, we're completely irrelevant now. We need to just forget about it entirely. And first, I say to everyone, you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You don't have to stop talking about one thing to talk about another thing, like it being a hobby or it being for outreach or contesting or whatnot. But there is a resurgence in interest in amateur radio from, at the very least, the Canadian governments at the provincial and federal level. RAC has recently we've reorganized the field organization. The changes take effect on January 1st, 2023. Any members who are interested should be reading our magazine TCA as it comes out. Our community services officer Jason Tremblay VE3JXT is writing about it a lot. In fact, we just today received approval. We're going, him and myself and another ham are going to Halifax to do training with the municipality of Halifax and the local club there on WinLink and the use of WinLink as a means of communication and disaster comms as a whole. And the city and the province are involved, and they're the ones footing the bill. So there is a renaissance of sorts coming at this. And it's not just around public service as far as disaster comms go, or serving first responders. A lot of it also has to do with serving the organizations that take care of humanitarian aid, which is something that's often forgotten about in a disaster.
Yep.
After the disaster passes, the infrastructure is gone, and fine, you've got your first responders, but then you have all the shelters, and you're sheltering potentially tens of thousands of people. Well, if you've lost your infrastructure, then how do you know where things go? So there are things happening there. And for those who are interested, I would say keep an eye on TCA, keep an eye on Jason's column, and you'll know more about it. If you want to get involved, definitely keep an eye on Jason's column, because we're looking for volunteers to staff the new committees that we've struck.
Fantastic. Okay, let's slide on over. Camping with your buddy Hex. That looks like one awesome portable station you got there.
That is the best portable antenna I've ever had, and my wife bought it from they only brought one to Dayton, and my wife convinced the owner of Buddy Pole to sell it to her to give to me for our anniversary.
How long does it take to put that together on site?
20 minutes.
Come on, seriously?
I have worked doing St. Paul twice and doing a couple of other field activities. There are portable hex beam options out there. Buddy Pole makes some really good stuff, and they spend a lot of time engineering it to make it as easy as possible to take up and to put down, and make it as portable as possible. That antenna from start to finish, including the mast, takes me 25 minutes, and that mast goes up to that's a 10-meter mast, and it all collapses into two 9.5-pound bags that are 165 centimeters long.
That's awesome. And how would you compare it to an off-center fed dipole put up, let's say, at 25 or 30 feet?
Oh no, it's a beam. I'm getting 2.5 dB gain on 20 on the front end of that. I can't remember when I'm at 10. So it's but I can't go below 20. At 20 is as low as I go. I mean, it's a 10-foot diameter, 3-meter diameter hex beam, spider web. So I would, the only thing I use the dipole or the vertical for is then anything under 20, so 30 and down. I've got an Alpha Senior DX vertical that's good for 500 watts, and I was using it last weekend camping up at Meaford. I've got a Chameleon tactical Delta Loop that I use. I use in either the Delta Loop V, or I just use as a ground staked vertical. I've got a backpack with a 135 foot and a 270 foot off center fed dipole and various lengths of coax. It's just throw the backpack on and find a tree and hang it and run as much cable as I can. That's that backpack. So,
yep.
Okay, we got a lot of folks, both in Chris's camp and in mine, that are huge into QRP. So this is your 705. Tell us about the Canada Day contest.
Well, so it's my QRP kit, but the device to the left of the IC705 is the PA500 D-Expedition model 100 watt amplifier that was made by I can't remember his call sign. He's a German guy. He makes that to match up with the DIY 599 radio. So that's 4 watts in, approximately 85 to 95 watts out.
Jeez.
And the idle current on it is 28 milliamps at 13.8 DC.
Wow.
So that's the kit as you see it there is designed to be as low draw as you can get at idle. So if you turn the screen on the ICOM off and you're just in receive, I was measuring at about 190 to 195 milliamps at idle. So that's a homemade 15 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery pack. I can operate for more than 24 hours just listening without having to add solar. And in the Pelican case is a PowerFilm 120 watt foldable solar panel. That's what I'm running the contest off of. The cellular router there has been recently replaced with Starlink RV. I forked over for Starlink, and it's the best decision. It's the best portable internet decision I ever made.
Wow.
So
Man, I'm when it comes to that stuff, when I set up in the field, I mean, I rely totally on my cellular connection on my iPad and my phone.
Well, in my business, I own my own IT firm. I have for 22 years. That's how I pay for all this crap. And I was paying $95 a month to have a sat phone, to have a Global Star sat phone on standby for when I was going in areas where I couldn't have cellular. And I realized more and more that it was useless because no one wants to talk to me anymore. They just want me to hop on and fix things. So Starlink RV is 170 Canadian per month, and it's unlimited. And basically, I just put the dish on the ground, point it to the sky, wait for 15 minutes, and I've got 150 megs a second out of the air.
Wow!
So it didn't make sense to continue. I pay a little bit more to have broadband internet access anywhere I can see the sky.
That's great.
So
that's great.
Okay, let's talk about Charlie Yankee 9 Charlie 2019. I guess you were out there twice.
Yeah, the first time was 2016. The second time was 2019. I always wanted to do a de-expedition. That's one of my bucket list items. And one day in 2015, I was in the basement with my wife, who is VA3MEW, who got her license to figure out what she was getting herself into, and she still said yes. And I said, I want to do this. I want to do a de-expedition. I was reading about, you read about the weird, crazy places that people go, and you see the pictures, and I wanted to know what it was like to be on the other end of a pileup. So I started doing some research, and where can I go that's not going to cost me an arm and a leg? Well, there's Sable Island and St. Paul Island. These are Canadian entities, so I don't have to worry about travel documents. I'm a citizen. St. Paul was close enough that you could get by boat. So I started looking for a boat captain. And then I forgot about it for a while because I'm married with kids. So it happens. I got a phone call one day from Randy, November 0 Tango Golf, and saying, "Hi, I'm Randy. Who are you? And are you going to St. Paul?" I'm like, "I'm Phil. Here's what," give him my background. I said, I wanted to go on a de-expedition, and I was thinking about St. Paul because I'm a Canadian, and I think it's easier for me to get to than most other places. And it's at the time it was number 35 on the list. It was pretty high up there. He explained that there was a group of Americans that was planning to go, and he offered. He's like, "Can you go? You want to come with us?" I said, "Sure." It's like, "Good. While you're coming, can you take care of our insurance, our permit to the island, and get us a license?" Like, "Sure." Which is a concern because none of them had Canadian calls. No one had Canadian privileges. I'm a Canadian advanced, that's your extra, the American extra. So I contacted Fisheries and Oceans, which is the most efficient of all Canadian government agencies. I say that dripping with sarcasm. They were great. We got a permit to the island, and 12 of us went, and we operated 8 stations, 4 on one side of the island, 4 on the other side of the island, and we had enough separation that we could operate same band.
Nice.
So we were able to operate 20 CW on one side and 20 phone on the other. And in that so we operated for 10 days. And we did 64,400 QSOs.
Wow.
And there was a competition between both sides of the island. The people in the Atlantic Cove, and I should have given you a picture of the island. There's a cove in the middle of the island where there's a little bay, and that's where one set of stations went. And they set up some really interesting boutique antennas. Like they had the 10-meter monobander, 20-meter monobander. They had a bazooka. They had a Battle Creek Special 160. I was on the northeast point of the island, which is a rock physically separate from the rest of the island, about 600 by 700 feet large. There's a lighthouse on it, but it has a 320-degree view of the ocean. And we set up 2 OCF dipoles, a hex beam, and a vertical hung from the top of the lighthouse, 135 feet long on a 35-degree down angle, terminated at the radial system of the medium wave naval beacon that used to be there, still existed.
Oh, beautiful.
It's tuned at 1845 kilohertz at 1.5 to 1 SWR.
Wow.
So, and we did 5,000 more QSOs on the other side. So when we went back in 2019, it was a much smaller operation. There was only 8 of us. We went entirely by chopper, owned by Pat N2IEN, who was with us the first time. And we did another 32,000 Qs on top of that. And some of that was during 2 days of a G2 storm.
Whoa.
but we still managed to pull off that many queues. And both times we did satellite. We were able to offer 2 grids the first time, 1 grid the second time, because the grid line went right through the island, so we were able to cheat a bit and do that. But I remember, being on 20 meters and spreading people across 10 kilohertz of bandwidth and still having 10,000 people talk back. I mean, it was an experience. That's what it's like to be on the other end of a pilot.
Yeah.
But it wasn't all hard work, I see.
No, because Pat has a helicopter. And Pat decided one day he was done eating field rations, so he went and got lobster and pizza.
Field
That's roughing it.
Well done. Well deserved is what I'm thinking.
The best part of it was we had 5-bar LTE cellular on the island because Bell Alliant basically put towers all along the coast of the North Atlantic so that any ships operating in the North Atlantic could get cellular access. So I was getting 40 megs per second internet. So
Wow.
we live logged the entire thing. If you queued us, you were in the club log in 5 seconds.
Oh, wow.
That's why I was getting really mad when people were calling for insurance contacts. But you don't need to do insurance contacts. You're wasting my time. Stop.
Yeah, I can imagine temperatures. So, was it cool out on the island? Was it warm? I mean, it looks like, I know you mentioned the storm, but you had some good weather.
Well, so the first time we went, the weather, the temperature was great. I mean, we're going in dead of summer, so it's 23 to 28 degrees. There was always a breeze. The first time we went, Lee WW2DX lost his EME array in a storm.
Oh.
What the newfies call a stiff breeze, we call 90 kilometer per hour. The second time we went, it was stormy and like high waves and high winds the day before we got there, and the day after we left. And while we were there, the winds never broke 25 kilometers an hour. It was the perfect weather. The fishermen there and the boat captains are like, you got horseshoes stuck somewhere, son, because it's never like that out there. So we got lucky.
Fantastic. Everything came together.
Yep.
Tim, any comments or questions on this?
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I don't know about a bucket list item, but that's something I'd love to do. I'm not a big traveler though, so I wonder. I don't know. Is there some place in the U.S. we can go?
Islands on the air.
I just don't know. I don't know if Fish and Wildlife will let you go there anymore. There's there's a couple of islands that are DX entities in the States that are along your coast, but they're Fish and Wildlife reserves, and it's getting access.
Yeah.
Right.
A good person to ask about that would be Murray, Whiskey Alpha 4, Delta Alpha November. That's the guy you would want to ask about that. He knows about those places.
Are there a bunch of islands up in the northern Great Lakes? I mean, there's something in the boundary waters up there that.
Nothing that's considered DX.
Right. Nothing's a DX entity. Right.
Well,
Yeah. For the United States, I guess you'd have to go out like into the Pacific Ocean somewhere.
No. Where am I thinking? It's
Catalina.
Is it KC6?
Is Catalina considered? Is it really?
I don't know.
I can't. Like I said, I don't know enough about your entities, but there are some that aren't too far from your coasts. Similar to St. Paul and Sable, because I mean, St. Paul and Sable are relatively close to Nova Scotia. In fact, they wouldn't be considered DX now because they are considered Nova Scotia. But I don't think no one at the ARRL wants to change those rules, because then they'll nullify everyone's results, and the Japanese will get very, very angry.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some stuff off the coast of Texas too. I would imagine
that might be what I'm thinking of.
Texas and Florida.
It's always Texas and Florida.
Texas and Florida.
So.
I need a map.
I have one right here actually. So as we're speaking, I'm looking to see if there's anything that shows up as a separate entity.
I know there's at least one that is that fisheries, that your Fish and Wildlife Service are very strict about letting people on. I think the last time anyone went there was about 6 or 7 years ago. I can't remember the name and I can't remember the prefix. As far as no one in the chat's come up with it yet, because someone else has to know what it is. Anyhow.
All right, let's move forward. Chris, if you find it, let us know.
Yeah, I'll keep it.
So, scouts. You've done some work with the Scouts, and I think this is a very commendable effort to introduce ham radio into the Scouts. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with this, Phil?
Sure. Well, like most Scouters, you know, they said it was only gonna be one night a week. Everyone gets that joke. So my son became a Cub years ago, and they realized quickly after I dropped him off when they saw the truck with the two weird antennas on that I was a ham, and they invited me. They said, "Do you know what this Joda thing is?" I'm like, I happen to know what Joda is, so I started helping. I started bringing my field kits out to do Joda and to do displays at some of the camps we do in the area. There's a very large Scout reserve about 10 minutes from my house. It's one of the larger ones in Ontario. It's very well attended. And then I became a Scouter, and I still kept doing it. You'll see pictures later on of me doing demonstrations to Scouts. So everyone in the Scouting area knows I'm a ham and knows I'm a radio geek. In 2019, so back up a little bit. So when I got my license and I joined the local club, a guy named John Langtree became my Elmer. His call sign was VE3NEC, same age as my dad. Over the years, he became one of my closest friends and like a second father to me, to the point where he called me my son. So he had no family, never married. So he died of cancer in 2019 pretty suddenly, and I found out that amongst a few other things, he willed me and my wife the contents of his house, and he specifically willed me the contents of his shop, which were extensive and old in some cases. And that includes all the equipment you see in front of you. And I couldn't bring myself to sell the stuff because I'd spent so many years playing with it. That the HF radio you see there is like the fourth IC 775 DSP sold in Canada. You know, that's one of those radios that cost $10,000 or $11,000 when it first came out. That was the flagship. And John always bought the flagship. That Vectronics tuner you see was back when Vectronics was made in Toronto. So back before MFJ bought them. So I took all of his gear and it sat in my basement, and I said, I want to put this somewhere where people, especially kids, are going to have the chance to use it. Because how many kids are going to have parents that are going to let them put up an antenna, even if it's a wire?
Yeah, right.
Because they're going to have the money to get access to this stuff. So I talked to George Henderson, who's the local the group commissioner in the area, and I still am the contact scouter for First Acton Troop. I said, I want to put this here, put up a tower, his tower. And he said, go for it. What do you need? I'm like, I need you to turn away while I dig a hole and I strap a tower to the side of the building. And he said, well, it's the land is owned by the Board of Education. Technically, do we have a problem? I said, well, no, because there's this document that I was just talking about that says Land Use Authority. And I showed him the document. He said, okay. And we put it up. And in 2019, I licensed it as VE3XRQ. And, interesting fact, if you're a ham in Canada who dies, ICE, it holds your call for a year, and then it releases it back to the database. So a year later, I got John's old call, and I assigned it to the station. So that's VE3NEC in his memory. And I've done
a license plate down there
in my house. Yeah, that's the license plate from his old Jeep.
Okay.
So, so the station there is an ICOM IC775. It's a 200 watt rig, a little ICOM dual bander FM, an ICOM R7000 scanner. I'm sure you're starting to see a pattern here.
Yep.
Vectronics 3000 watt tuner, although he swore he'd never buy an amp and he never did. And his computer, and then outside it's just a TV tower with I've got an X50 on top of it. I've got a very wideband scanner antenna off of an offset going to the scanner, and I have a couple, and then I have a G5RV dipole, but I've got it set up so I can replace it with an OCF later. And what the Scouts really like is I put a ubiquity access point up there, and I'm grabbing internet from the school next door, giving access to the internet to all the venturers in the basement. So the teenagers really love me.
How do you find that the kids are taking to ham radio? Or is there
so like anything, and it hasn't changed much. And I'll give you an example. 2019, before everything went to hell, we did at the Blue Spring Scout Reserve, we did a soapbox rally. We did every year, and it was 42 degrees Celsius that year, so it was hot and it was humid, and they wanted an activity where the kids could sit back and relax and have a drink and cool off. That was him, so, and that's when Scouter Warren's like, well, Phil, bring your radio gear, show them something cool. And a lot of the kids were always respectful, and if they weren't into it, they hummed and hawed and nodded, and they thank you, Scouter Phil. But in every group of kids like that, without fail, there's one or two who hang off of you for the rest of the weekend and go, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Why didn't I know that this existed before? And so that happened. I had two of those kids, and just they stuck with me for the rest of the weekend. And their scouters came up and said, do you mind? I'm like, absolutely not. This is me when I was their age, so I completely appreciate this. And I happen to know both of them got their license. One's got their advanced, and that one has become the secretary for his local club. And he's 17 now. So
fantastic.
Amateur radio has probably been, with the exception of, my parents and my wife and having my own kids, probably been the one of the single most positive parts of my growth as a person. And the people that I've met, of course, we've all met hams that we want to punch, but I've met very, very few. The people that I've been exposed to in being involved in this service have made me proud to be part of this community.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that explains the Scout House Station, and that's. I had a couple of new kids join my troop. Just their first meeting was actually on Tuesday evening, and I always turn the radio on while we're there just so I can listen to 40 meters in the background. They're like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Well, those are people. That's ham radio. Those are people talking. Where are they?" I'm like, I listen to calls. I'm like, "Well, that one's from 4-land, and that one's from 6-land. Well, where's 6-land? California. No, like what? Is that over the internet? I'm like, no, that's out of the sky."
Yeah, that's right.
Like, really? No. So yeah, a couple, their eyebrows raised and their eyes popped out of it. So you never know. They may develop an interest.
Fantastic.
So if I can just jump in real quick, one time when my son was years ago was in the Scouts, I went to the Scout leaders and I told them, I said, I'm at the ham radio, and I can give the kids a demo. So they came to the house, and I put up I had my map up, and I just turned the radio on. I tuned around. And I tell them where the guy was, and I have them go over mark on the map so they could see. I taught them how to made up little sheets so I could send their name in Morse code on a little oscillator, right? And then I brought them outside. Let me show you the antenna farm, and I showed them. At the time I had a G5RV, I had the 3-element beam up, and I think I had something else, whatever it was. But here's what I found: the kids were they were kind of young. They were Cub Scouts, so I don't think it really impacted them. But the Scout masters were fascinated by it. They were like, "Wow, this is really cool. You can get on this little radio and talk around the world." It's like, yeah, go figure.
I happen to know that one of the scout leaders that attended a couple of the events that I volunteered at before I became a scouter, eventually got his license. Now he happens to be the secretary of one of the largest amateur radio clubs in Ontario, which I believe Tracy knows. It's Chris.
Oh yeah,
that's Chris. That was Scouter Chris, and I think I may be responsible for him jumping in the money pit. So
yeah,
this is a good guy. He's done a lot for just.
He's a great guy. You guys did well to get him on your executive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So
okay, we still got some items to tick off our agenda here. Look at this. What a beautiful bike. Tell us about your install on the bike here, Phil.
Well, I bought this summer because my Virago 1100 was too small for me. I've always wanted a bigger cruiser. This was a great price. I got it for a steal. But like every vehicle I own, it has to have a weird antenna. I have a reputation to uphold. So, and the saddlebags in this bike are perfect for it. So I took the saddlebag from the other side off. Drilled holes and put proper mounts in it so I could remove the saddlebag and unplug everything so my mechanic doesn't shoot me. And I installed the Yaesu FTM 400 XD XD on it. So the faceplate's in the front there, next to my Bluetooth charger for the phone and my cup holder. There's a push to talk button on the clutch side handle grip that I can hit with my index finger while it's at rest. And then that goes to a Sena SR10 push to talk to a radio Bluetooth adapter that then pairs with the Sena 50S Bluetooth set that I have in my helmet, which I use for phone music, telephone, and then two-way radio. The SR10 is an adapter that CINA made specifically to interface two-way radios to Bluetooth devices. Had a lot of interference problems with it until I realized that one of the design flaws of the CINA SR10 is that there is no ground loop isolation from the DC part of the circuit. So when you put DC through it, it's picking up all the engine noise. That's all you can hear is the alternator and the spark plugs. So a couple of audio transformers, a couple of capacitors, and then all of a sudden, oh look, the problem went away. So I can do, and it's 50 watts. So that's an APRS radio. So when I'm riding it, it beacons out, and that's a Diamond. I can't remember the model number, but it's one of the higher gain ones in the back. So that means that both, so that's my mobile installation of the bike, and whatever. I hit the local repeaters from around here, and that's all I need to do.
So
Very
it's
cool.
VHF, UHF then, right?
Yep.
Well, yeah, until he puts the spider beam back there. Let's see.
Yeah, well, there's not a whole lot of metal for HF. I mean, maybe 10 meters, maybe.
Yeah.
Phil, didn't you say you rode this down to the ARRL meeting that you went to?
So one of the things that RAC does, so RAC, for those of you who might not know, Radio Amateurs of Canada was formed in 1993 by the merging of two organizations, the Canadian Radio Relay League, which was an offshoot of the ARRL, and the Canadian Amateur Radio Foundation, which was an independent organization. And RAC formed the two of them. But RAC kept all of the historical relationships that both had. For example, the Radio Advisory Board of Canada was one of those things that came to the new organization. The other thing that came was that the CRRL was a member organization of the ARRL, and even after it split off completely and didn't have voting rights, it had observer rights to the board meetings. RAC maintained that. So whenever RAC has an AGM or a planning meeting, the president of the ARRL is invited to come join us. And every time the ARRL has their board meetings, which are twice a year, it's always the third weekend of January and July in Hartford, Connecticut. The president of RAC is along with the president of the IARU is invited to sit as an observer. So July, the weekend of July 16th, I said I'll save RAC some money and I'll save ARRL some money and I'll ride my bike because it's a lot cheaper on gas than my truck. And it was a great ride.
Fantastic. Very cool. All right. Now, here's an interesting story. You operated a special event station from France. Can you give us some background on this one, please, Phil?
So a group of hams from BC and Ontario put together the VIMI, the VE100 VIMI and TM100 VIMI special event for 2017. And it was to commemorate the winning of the Battle of Vimy Ridge and the Battle of Arras by the Canadian Armed Forces. For those of you who don't know the history, that was one of the turning point battles of World War I, and it's generally accepted as when Canada became less of a colony and more of a nation. So in April 2017 was the 100th anniversary of this, and there were a lot of ceremonies at the Canadian War Memorial, which is land that was ceded to Canada by France after the end of World War I, and there's a giant memorial there. It's quite beautiful. It's quite moving. So leading up to the event in France, there were VE100 VIMI / 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera, stations across the country. And you got awards based on how many you worked, and it all culminated with the final station in France. And the reason it's TM and not VE is because I think back in 2011, even though Canada still technically owns the land, we ceded operational authority of the land back to the French government, and they interpreted that as you can't use a Canadian license here, you have to use a French license. That's why it's TM100 VIMI. So the station there operated for 10 days, and they invited me as a guest operator, and I went, and I made 13 or 14 Qs. So those conditions were awful, but I managed to talk to a couple Canadians, like one from Toronto, one from Newfoundland. And there's a bit more to the story. After the Battle of Vimy was won, the British Corps signals they were supposed to radio back to command to headquarters in London and say, hey, we won. Their equipment got wrecked, so they went to the Canadians, the Canadian Corps of Signals, which are now known as the Royal Canadian Corps of Signals, or the RCCS, known affectionately by the military as Jimmies, set their gear up, and they made contact with defense headquarters. while hearing a lot of noise that they weren't sure where it was coming from. There was a lot of interference, a lot of other signals on the band. And London realized very quickly that what they were hearing was the Eastern Front. Well, London couldn't hear the Eastern Front because of the topography. One of the reasons that Vimy was such a catch was because of its elevation. If you had Vimy, you had the high ground, literally. So once headquarters realized that, the Canadian signalmen were told to stay there, and they became the hub for communications for the rest of World War One, and they didn't close up shop until the war was won. So the signals that the HF signals that left Vimy that day were probably the only ever peacetime signals to have left that area ever in throughout history.
Very cool.
Wow.
All right. Now, honestly, there's been a lot of fascinating topics up to this point, but this one blew my mind, Phil. QRO Portable.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us about QRO Portable.
Oh, yeah.
Look, QRP is fun, but it's annoying.
Here it comes.
Even look, QRP to me is 100 watts. Okay, that's I know that's sacrilege, and everyone's going to yell at me, and I'm sure I can operate it at 10 watts. I'd rather operate at 100. If I have 100 watts, I'd rather operate at 5. And this was the kit that I built before I built the IC705 kit. And there you go, Clay. Yeah, I've heard that one before. And it blew up, as most of my projects do, into, well, I'm going to start with this little small idea, and then, oh crap, I've just spent $8,000. I want to build a portable kit, and then the portable kit ended up with this. This was kit number 1. It's a FT991A, which is and everything. That's the everything radio. That's DC to daylight, 160 meters through 70 centimeters, all modes, all bands. I added afterwards. I added the Pactor 3 modem. Inside that, so everything in the back, it's all laser cut. All the case work is done by Novexcom out of California. All laser cut. The back is 2 fans in and out. It's got all the antenna ports, power pole ports, USB port. On the inside is an industrial USB 2 hub, 12-volt powered, West Mountain radio, rig blaster, power distribution. Everything's tied up inside. You're in the wrong place, buddy. Sorry. My desk mate. And then I realized I wanted more power, so I got another road case, and I got the ALS 500 amplifier. So that's 12 volts. Full board draw is 80 amps. And then the LDG tuner, and then you stack one on top of the other. You're good. Now, I can run both of those cases on 3 12-volt 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate batteries, and I can run at power. I can run at power without a charge for about 4 hours of 50% operating duty. So I built 3, in battery boxes, 3 solar packs. 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate batteries. I got Jenison charge controllers, West Mountain radio power strips, and I've got 3 folding Dokio 300 watt solar panels. So in theory, and I've done it once because carrying it all is bloody heavy. I can set that up in the sun, and I can run at 500 watts on solar. So
in the sun.
There's the comment that I was thinking in my head.
In the sun, in Canada.
It doesn't fit in the backpack. It fits in the back of my truck. If I'm going in the backpack, then I go into the Pelican case where my 705 is,
right,
and I grab the 5 or 6 things that I need.
Right.
I've got 2 of the Power Film 18 amp hour roll up solar chargers. The battery built in. I had a couple of those shipped up here. I love those. Are for camping. Those are great, especially if my wife wants to go to the beach. I need to charge my phone. Okay, throw the solar phone out, plug it in. Yeah. She's like, "This is the best thing you ever bought. How much is it? Don't ask. Just."
No kidding.
Now, Phil, have you taken this QRO? You said you took it out one. Have you actually operated it a bunch of times out?
I've done field day on it. I've done a couple of field days on it. I've done a couple of Canada days on it. I've done what you're seeing here. Remember, I told you about that. I went to the Scout Soapbox Derby event. That's where this is. That's at Lister Hut at Blue Springs. Oh, I've put some hours on it, and I've done some MCOM prep work on it. So generally speaking, when I go camping or when I go somewhere, I either take I usually don't take both cases. The amp rack doesn't get used very much because if I'm operating, most of what I do is digital. I work. I mean, I like working phone. I mean, I've got like the headset for this. The headset for this is actually a Radio Sport RS60S headset, so that's what goes with this kit. But a lot of what I do is digital, so there's no. And if you're running digital, there's no point having an amp. If you can't get digital through at 100 watts, then you're not
That's
getting
right.
through. So
Absolutely right. Yep.
the amp is for if I'm doing CW or if I'm doing phone,
Right.
and also just to prove that I could. Let's be honest, that entire kit is to prove that I could. That's what that was.
So, wow. I'm blown away.
You know, Tracy, that is so far out of our wheelhouse.
No,
Tracy told me QRO Portable, and I had this vision of you pulling behind like a diesel generator and a welding machine.
No, I wanted something that I could run on off grid, but that I could run at power. I mean, if you're thinking about end of the world SHTF, something. I mean, that's what you're looking at. There is about as close to the civilian equivalent as a Harris quick readiness terminal as you're going to get.
I get it, and you can find a flagpole with the welding machine. You could just make a vertical out of it with the welder.
Yeah. No, the last time that came out in full power, I was there's a little spot I know up in central Ontario. We call it Northern Ontario. It's not. It's Central Ontario. Northern Ontario's got more bugs than people. On a river out in the middle of nowhere. It's in the boondocks, and I ran that on. I didn't run on solar. I've got two Honda EU 2000 inverters, like the best generators ever made, which I got for St. Paul, and I ran an OCF, a 270-foot OCF dipole over the river, so I could I flat topped it, and I could do my noise level at 160 meters was S1, so it was wonderful, and I did field day on that, and it was wonderful.
Nice.
So
nice. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Phil. You've given us an awful lot to take in here. One of the things we do in our stream here is we take questions from Chris gets sent questions, Tim gets sent questions, I get sent questions, and so let's take a look at a couple of questions that have come in. First one came in for Tim, and this has to do with running a QRP end-fed half-wave antenna. So, Tim, do you want to weigh in on this one first, and then we'll go around the table?
Mine works better off the ground. So if you have it on the ground and you put it a couple of feet up in the air, if you have the ability to do that, it works better.
What do you think, Phil?
Generally accepted knowledge, the higher off the ground, the better, because closer to the ground, the more interaction you're going to have with the ground, the more you're going to.
It'll detune. Yeah, it'll detune. Especially, you could get into questions of ground connectivity and all that other stuff too. But
my rule has always been a quarter wave off the ground where you can. And when you get down to 40 and 30 and 60, whatever, you're not going to get there. But then you're envious. But especially getting it higher off the ground also is important to get it away from your transceiver, so that it's not close to your transceiver, so that it's not at level, so that it's not going to feed RF back into the radio.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, any thoughts on this one?
I have very limited experience with NFEDs, and when I was noodling around with Tim's that I have, but I don't think mine's a half-wave. I think mine's a random. I think the one that I have from you, I think.
I don't remember.
I forget too. But I had it up on an angle, and at first I started it. I set it up at where the transformer is at the ground, on the ground, basically. And first I tried like the little pigtail with the little stake in it, and just tried to use ground from that. I could not get it to match. I started. Let me try throwing a counterpoise on it, and I threw I guess like a 30-foot piece of wire on it, and it sort of tuned a little better. I said, all right, I'll try one more thing. And then I elevated the transformer up about 6 feet, maybe 8 feet off the ground. And then I ran, of course, now knowing it's off the ground, and I ran an elevated counterpoise, and it sort of tuned, but I still could not get it to really match. So part of me is thinking, all right, again, not being familiar enough with these kinds of antennas to really experiment with it. So I said, it's going to be one of those things. I'll have to just set it up again and just kind of tinker around with it some more and just, just to figure out what it is. But
yeah, the best deployment I had for that thing actually was here in the backyard into my neighbor's tree at like a 45-degree angle. And I would take the ground spike and I would just use that as like an anchor in the ground, and then put some tension on the wire, so it was a flat thing. So the enclosure is actually floating a little bit in the air, and that worked fine. That worked fine for me. So you're about 6-8 inches off of the ground, but if you can get it up a little higher than that, that works fine too.
Because I think the angle was about 40 degrees, maybe 35, 40 degrees. I think is where I had it. So, but
that might be a little low. The one I just put up at the cottage, I for the random wire, I like to get that almost as vertical as possible. So, a very high angle, 6-8 inches off the ground, whatever, into the ground spike.
Right.
And I'm good on all bands up to 40.
Right.
Down to
right.
40.
Now David brings up a good point. Now my coax that I was using was maybe about 20 feet. So it wasn't a really long, it didn't have a long run going to, because look, when you operate QRP, you have to try to get as much signal to the antenna as you can. So the tuner, actually I have it sitting right here. The tuner I was using was this little MFJ manual tuner. Tracy made me a believer. I'm a believer in manual tuner.
Oh yeah.
Those things are awesome. You having one of those in a backpack is better than anything.
Oh, it's gold.
Yeah. So again, it was just, and this past, and I tried it this past field day, because I made field day for me just nothing but an experiment in QRP. So I tried the end-fed wire antenna, and I also tried running the 817 off of internal batteries, which was it's reduced power. And what I really wanted just to see, well, A, can I make contacts, which of course was nearly impossible, and B was to see how long the batteries would last. So that was there was 2 tests going on at the same time. And then when the batteries died, and I went to the you
need to get yourself one of those 18-watt power films.
Yeah, that's right. I have no solar stuff at all. So then I went to the Bioenno battery, and then I changed to the vertical antenna, and then but it was getting dark, so it's getting me nighttime. So of course the propagation changed, and that's when Tracy and I were texting back and forth. Hey, this guy's work this guy, work that guy, going back and forth working people.
About 16 years ago, I made a QRP, my first QRP kit out of an 817. Actually, I was published in QST. I can't find the picture, and nor do I want to, because it was a horrible picture. I worked field day with an 817 ND, and in my club, I think we did about 85 Qs, and on 5 watts, only CW and phone.
Yep.
That was rather, and I think I was running off a Hustler vertical, actually.
Yeah.
No joke.
I was rather impressed. I mean, that was a respectable score considering we had 5 watts in a farmer's field, and we were running solar. We were solar and battery. That was it.
Well, one of Tracy's, one of the first videos I saw that Tracy did was when he operated with his 817 and he operated field day with it. And I said, if you can operate field day QRP, then you could probably do pretty much anything with QRP. So that's what really made me do it. But I've done field day twice QRP, and it was tough going.
Well, don't forget sideband. If you're doing anything field day, just unplug the microphone. You're just gonna annoy yourself. Now that you can do digital in field day, because you couldn't back when I did this with the 817. Now that you can do digital, the sky's the limit. Now,
much easier. Yes.
I mean, I'm the first. I think the first field day they did digital, I sat on 14.070. I just did PSK 31 for 24 hours.
Sure.
I just knocking them off, and I'm thinking to myself, well, in an emergency, this could work.
It'll work. That's
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't even hook up the microphone anymore. Hardly.
Well, the guy who gave me all 3 of my amateur radio exams probably is the fastest CW operator on earth. He's like 43 words a minute.
Wow.
He's basically Riddy. Like I think he actually can go as fast as Riddy. And he doesn't have a mic. He has a $4,000 Bengali key, but he doesn't have a mic.
Right.
All right, let's take a look at. There's one more question we can have a chat about.
Somebody in the chat mentioned that they use 17.5 counterpoise,
Yeah.
which is the best length that I've found too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it could be like I was using a 30-foot, so it could have been too long.
17.5. Yeah.
All right. That's worth that. I can experiment with that too.
Okay.
I'll drive out there and set it up with you. We can.
Yeah.
Hey, Phil, take a look at this. What would your advice be to this ham?
Just leave
I have been pleasantly surprised, and I have been screwed.
Oh, yeah.
It's for some big money. First of all, I have a Kenwood 590 SG, and I know why people wanted the receiver on it is incredible. Look, the 7300 is great, but it doesn't. The receiver on the 590 still doesn't beat it yet.
Sorry, did you mean that the other way around? That the 590 SG
it's got a better receiver.
outperforms the 7300?
I think so, but I've played with both, and the 590 receiver is great, which is great because they had to make up for the fact that the TS2000 receiver was an unmitigated disaster.
Was it really?
Oh.
I mean, I saw it. I just, it was never something that occurred to me to use.
No, the TS2000 receiver was awful, and what made it even worse is it's supposed to be a satellite radio, and there's a birdie at 435.5 megahertz.
Oh,
so I mean, right in the middle of the downlink of like six FM birds, it made it almost useless. It was a great radio as far as features went, but even the HF receiver was left much to be desired. As for this guy, if you were a Canadian, I would say do an Interac e-transfer, because then you have. If you're buying from someone you don't know, then I would suggest you use PayPal, but you do not, under any circumstances, use PayPal as friends and family. You use PayPal as though you're buying from him.
Pay the fee.
He pays the fee. Let's be clear. You don't pay the fee as the PayPal buyer. The seller pays the fee.
Which is protection.
But make him do it, because then if you get screwed, you can go back to PayPal. And I have been screwed out of a $7,000 purchase before, and I went back to PayPal and said, "Hey, this is back in the days of eBay. Pony up," and they did. Took a month, but they did. So if you don't send cash, don't send money order, and definitely don't do friends and family. Do it as though they're a vendor and you're a buyer, and then you're fine. And then if it turns out to be a good transaction, go on QRZ and report them as a good seller, because they deserve that.
Here's my advice, though. If you're thinking about buying a used Kenwood, go to Yankee Electronics or YankeeKenwoodRepair.com. There's a guy in Green Bay, and that's all they do is old Kenwood stuff like that. I bought 2, maybe 3 rigs from them, and broke them, and then had them repaired, and then and I've never had an issue with using those guys. I think it's like YankeeElectronics.com or something like that.
Yeah, do you think he'd have something as new as a 590?
I don't know. Honestly, I haven't looked in a long time.
I know they're in demand because they're out of production now. I mean, Kenwood, even pre-pandemic, that semiconductor fire in Fukushima screwed them. I mean, they lost the semiconductors for almost all of their radios. So
let's see.
They haven't made anything in 3 years.
I can't share my screen, but it looks like.
Either way, that's my recommendation. If you're buying from someone you don't know, do it like you would do with anyone else. Use a credit card and use something that you have buyers recourse. So
True.
Chris, what are your thoughts? Sorry, Tim, go ahead.
What was it? Was it a TS 590? I think he said.
590 Sierra Golf.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference. There's a 590, then there's the 590 SG. The SG is better. It's got the TX the TCXOs all taken care of, et cetera.
I don't see the SG. I gotta go.
You probably have 590s. I suppose if he could get a 590 and then he could go get the TCXO and just do that himself. That's the main difference. I think there are a couple of other firmware differences, and I think actually he may be able to firmware upgrade a 590 with the
yeah. I mean, even touch with a guy like this, though, he probably knows somebody who's got one for sale or something like that, and he's not gonna recommend anything that could be shady. So
There you go.
I don't see a 590. I see lots of. I see 850, 870, 430. There's their TS 2000X.
Yeah. Oh, so the X that's 160 through 70 plus 1.2 gigahertz. It's got 23 centimeters on it. Because that was supposed to be a satellite radio. It just didn't do a great job of it. Now, of course, the satellite radio of choice now is the IC 9700. I've been thinking about getting one of those to play with it, but my Flex because I've got the VHF UHF module inside. The integration with Sat Tracker is amazing.
Here we go. It's a TS 590 SG, $1,200.
$1,200?
Yep.
US used? Oh my god.
I can look at the description. TS 590 SG.
The fact that that's 1,200. Wow.
Oh wait. Oh, okay. Yeah, he's got it listed, but he says it's out of stock now. So.
Well, yeah.
But it's there. Hey, it's there.
Yeah, it's there, but they're never going to get stock again.
Yeah.
Because this was used. It's
Wow.
Doesn't tell you. You know what? Here, I'm going to copy the link and I'll put it in the chat, and people can grab it if they want.
So, Chris, what are your thoughts on buying used gear?
Yeah, it's funny. I bought used gear quite a few times, HF gear, and I've never had a problem. I've been very fortunate that way. I had a TS 570 that I bought on eBay, and it worked great. In fact, I sold it on eBay, so I never had a problem. In fact, this Tempo 1 I bought on eBay, and it came in, I fired it up, and it worked. The tubes are soft. I was like, okay, well, it's a tube rig, and it's an old tube rig, so that's going to happen. But yeah, how do you protect yourself from you get something and it comes in and you're like, wow, this thing's a dog, it doesn't work, and how do you protect yourself? And you've already plunked down the money, right? I like I said, it's been so long, I don't know, like if I had to go back at somebody, like if I bought it on eBay and a radio came in and it fired it up and it just didn't smoke, it just didn't work, how do you get your money back? How do you rectify that? You contact the seller and you hope the guy comes back to you. I don't know.
Well, no. If you're doing it on a service like eBay has a process, and I've gone.
They do.
They do. If you're buying it outside of a service like that, if it's two guys on QRZ.com going, or you're on a swap meet, but you're where you have to ship it. PayPal will protect you because they don't give if you're the other guy's got to have a PayPal account.
Right.
I
Correct.
don't know anyone selling and buying equipment that doesn't have a PayPal account. If they don't, that's the red flag right there. That means you run away.
Yeah, good point.
They've got a PayPal account and say, "Fine, I'll buy it off of you, but you're going to pay the fees as though you're a vendor." And if they
here's one. So how do you handle it say you're at a ham fest? I mean, what surprises me is the prices you see guys. They'll put a radio out on a table at a ham fest, $1,500, right? Who is walking around a ham fest with that kind of cash? That's the first question I ask, right? But my thing is like, okay, so say you go and you plunk down your $1,500 and you carry the rig to your car and you go home. You don't know this guy hole in the wall. You don't know where he is. You get it home and it's a dead radio.
Well, so I mean, at a ham fest, I've sold $2,000 radios at a ham fest. But what I did is I brought power with me, and I brought a dummy load with me, and I brought a walkie.
You showed it work.
Yeah. So I'll say and that's why people bought from me. It's like, okay, you want $2,000 for this radio? Yeah, here. It's a dummy load. I mean, but there's a power meter, and you can go ahead and play with it. If you smoke it,
it makes power, and you can hear it receive. Throw a piece of wire on it, you can hear receive on it, right?
And then But I think the problem is if you go to a ham fest, more than likely you're gonna be able to find that guy again. If you're buying it from God knows where on the internet, there's a chance that the guy might just you'll never find him. That's when you use a third party like PayPal, and that's a real protection, and that's
okay.
If you go through QRZ's rules about posting for sale, there are references to that where it's like if they say that they want friends and family, they're trying to screw you. Now, if you're in Canada, I don't want to use PayPal because that's an exorbitant fee. But if I use RAC EMT and someone screws me, I have recourse. I can go to my bank and say, "Hey, I got frauded. I was defrauded, and I want to open a case." Now it's harder, but you pay your dollar for your e-transfer. There's the protection that comes with that.
Yeah. Good.
All right, guys, I think it's time we wrap this thing up. Phil, closing comments from you?
I appreciate you guys having me here. I don't think I'm that special. I just think I'm a guy who spent way too much money and spent way too much time playing radio. And I'm pretty sure my wife would agree with that statement. But like I said, amateur radio has been one of the biggest parts of my personal development and my growth. Growing up as a kid, growing into adulthood, marriage, kids. It's basically been with me the entire time, and the people that I've been exposed to as part of the hobby and part of the service have been for the vast majority of my life have been good people and have helped me grow. And the reason I'm the president of RAC is because as the national organization, we are a regulated hobby, whether we like it or not. And we are the ones, it's Frank KM4, I can't remember his call sign. He likes to say everyone likes going to dinner, no one likes doing the dishes. And it's a good analogy. We need people to volunteer in these positions, and I'm here for now. I'm not going to be here in 3 or 4 years because RAC has term limits, and we need people to come up after us, after the current crop of executive and board members and volunteers and committees, to continue the work. If you're a member of this community and this is something that you think you're going to be with for the rest of your life, and you want to be as big of a part of your life as in mine and yours, then join your national organization. Join RAC, join the ARRL, join the RSGB. We are not going to get it right all the time. We're going to make mistakes, and we're going to do things that are going to piss you off. Tell us. We'll fix them. If you don't like the way things are being run, get involved. And if anyone has any problems, or if anyone has problems with RAC and anything, then I encourage you to either contact me or contact your regional director. If you want to say thank you, I drink Alexander Keith's and a lot of coffee. And that's all I have to say about that. And I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Good stuff. Hey, Tim, how about some closing comments from yourself?
You know what? I think if you're talking to Phil, it makes me want to go out to the junkyard and grab some like 12-volt alternators or something like that. I'll hook them up to my bicycle and make my wife, run while I'm operating or something,
How about you, Chris?
He's got a bunch of nice antennas, but he does not have, or didn't mention that he has the best equipment out there. So maybe he'll get a package in the mail or something, or maybe I'll send it to you and you could just give it to him.
I'm good on QRZ.
I'm ashamed.
I noticed that too, Tim. I noticed there was no. That's okay. Well, actually, my thing is like, well, first of all, Phil, what I liked is you started, I think, the same way many of us did. You had a CB radio, right? That's how I got into this crazy hobby, and probably about the same age, but I know I'm a lot older than you guys. So, my first ticket was 1976. So, but if there's something I'm taking away from this, is that I'm going to remortgage my house so I can try to catch up to Phil.
Don't give your wife.
You almost have to. You might make it. You might get enough out of that. I don't know. Maybe with the exchange rates nowadays, we could, maybe we'll head up to Canada and buy some of this stuff.
Just to answer Joseph's question quickly, it's a split between 80 and 60.
Okay.
I was one of Canada's first 60-meter licensees. I was VX9 GIA. I was one of the experimental license holders when ICID was looking at allowing us access to the 5 channels. So I've been on 60 as long as anyone up here has.
Nice. And Joseph's big into 60 as well, I know.
Yes.
Okay, well, listen, thank you very much, Phil. We really appreciate that you took the time to spend an hour and a bit with us. Fascinating story. You've had a tremendous life in ham radio so far. Your contribution to the hobby, I don't know. I can't think of anybody who's put the amount of energy and effort into it that you have. So congratulations and all of that, and a hearty thank you for your contribution. But that's it, folks. That's all for tonight. Thank you very much for tuning in, each and every one of you. We all greatly appreciate it. If you have any comments that you're watching this after the fact, please, comments or questions, leave them either on Chris's channel or my own channel, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Don't forget to reach out to Tim. Look him up on his eBay store, N9SAB antennas. He's got some great stuff over there. But for now, everybody, 7-3.